Welcome to the State of the Nation Weekly Update with me, Mike Sham. As you know, every week we examine a piece of our politics which has to be looked at a little bit closer. And one of the things that I want to discuss this week is the sudden movement of EFF members, or ex-EFF members, that are leaving the party to join Umkhonto weSizwe. The latest, now let's just take a step back. When did this start? Well, it started off at the elections where a little piece of the EFF got lost to the MK. They lost about 2 or 3%. That's the EFF. And as we know, MK came from nowhere to get about, close on 15% nationally and displaced the Economic Freedom Fighters as the third biggest political party in the country. Okay, this happened. There was a lot of tears spilt afterwards on that side of the aisle. And there's a big question. The big question of the time was, what is the similarities between the EFF and Umkhonto weSizwe? And there appeared to be quite a few differences. But here we have the EFF led by Julius Malema, and there we have MK led by Jacob Zuma. Well, shock waves were felt when Julius Malema's bromance with his co-founder Floyd Shivambu came to a grinding halt when Floyd Shivambu left to join Umkhonto weSizwe. And it was pretty obvious to see what was at play here. There were two things. There was the push and the pull factor. The push factor was that at a dinner at the end of last year, Julius Malema, clearly there'd been ructions within the EFF, had said nobody had better challenge him for the leadership of the party. It's his party. He is remaining in charge. Nobody had better challenge him for the leadership of the party. That obviously doesn't sit too well if you're the number two and you realize that your 40-year-old boss says that he's going to be there and you can see 20 years of being number two. If you're lucky, this is Africa, maybe 40 years of being number two. It never sits very comfortably. Obviously, spotting a career opportunity, Floyd Shivambu was in the market. The hallmark of Umkhonto weSizwe after the election was their complete confusion and lack of organization. Here you've got the guy who organized the EFF quite well, clearly looking for a job. You hire him, he becomes your chief organizer. You get him to do the tedious stuff like writing a constitution, etc. In other words, making up EFF Mark II. But this time in green, not in red. Floyd Shivambu leaves the EFF and the trickle turns into a bit of a flood. Next was to go was the prostitute, and that was Mzwanele Manye, who has been now sort of, the guy must have a big cupboard because he's had many different T-shirts. He was obviously a member of the ANC, then he became a member of the ATM, I love the name of that party, Voya Zingula's party. Then he became a member of the EFF. Now he's a member of Umkhonto weSizwe. And we all stood by while we waited to see some of these other people that would leave the EFF. And so it has happened. The disgraced former public prosecutor Busisiwe Mkhwebane, who looked quite uncomfortable in the overalls and not in her Gucci clothing, has now announced that she's leaving the EFF. Her husband's already a member of MK. I don't think you need to be Stephen Hawking to work out where she's going to end up. And now we see everybody's favorite angry actor, Fana Mokoena, also ex-ANC member, EFF member, now announcing he's going to leave the party. We always knew that he had close ties to Jacob Zuma. Once again, would not surprise anybody to see him go. And we wait and see what happens to our dear friend Carl Niehaus. But that's just me wondering. So, these people are leaving the EFF, and you know what it's like. Nobody wants to be at the restaurant that only has a few people in it. Nobody wants to go to the club that isn't busy. The EFF are in trouble here. We know they're in trouble here because Julius Malema has said nothing. So one can only imagine that there is a problem here. What is actually at play here? Let's first have a look at what gave birth to the Economic Freedom Fighters. Well, it started when both Julius Malema and Floyd Shivambu were kicked out of the ANC. by none other than Jacob Zuma. He was president at the time. They had been in charge of the Youth League. They were getting a little bit mouthy. Like most autocrats, he doesn't fancy other people showing leadership. The easy thing to do was to get his lackey, who happened to be Cyril Ramaphosa, to deliver the death blow and kick them out of the ANC. So off they go. These guys, being South African politicians, could hardly go back to their tech startups or their law practices. Basically, they needed a job. What do they know? They know politics. So they started a political party. They started the EFF. Once again, the main organizer seems to have been Floyd Shivambu. The main mouthpiece seems to have been Julius Malema. They came across as this Marxist-Leninist Fanonian entity where you had to wear uniforms and call each other by military names, called the EFF. Lots of theatrics, absolutely captured the imagination of many South Africans as we saw these people around dressed like domestic workers, dressed like mine workers, going into parliament, disrupting everything and just generally being obnoxious. But you've got to ask yourself, they were in the ANC that's in alliance with the South African Communist Party. Did they decide that the Communist Party isn't communist enough? Or what? Well, the sort of accepted wisdom at the time was that the Communist Party, at that time led by Johnny Walker himself, Blade and Zamandi, they'd really taken to this capitalist lifestyle. And perhaps they weren't really fighting for the downtrodden and the underserved in South Africa. And so the EFF was born, and all the way up until the last election, the EFF looked like they could even. There were people that came onto our show, very popular people that may or may not have shows on ETV, were talking about the fact that the EFF we're going to dislodge the Democratic Alliance as the next official opposition. Well, it didn't happen. And what happened? Well, what happened was Jacob Zuma, ever the victim, decided to start a new party called Umkhonto weSizwe. And we've even spoken to Umkhonto weSizwe. They're going to the election with no real manifesto, no real idea, but all they have is Jacob Zuma. And it seems to be a tribalist, anti-constitutionalist, anti-everything party. But they capture very much the Zulu vote. They do exceptionally well in KZN. As I've said before, you have to see it in the light of the fact that within the Zulu nation down in KZN, you had the recent passing of Mangosuthu Buthelezi in the last couple of years, then the Zulu Kings Welatini. There's a lack of leadership, and needless to say, they gravitate to the most Zulu of all the Zulus, and that being Jacob Zuma, and they do quite well. And now they're trying to backfill. They're trying to get people into their party, right, and desperately staff the place because their first forays into politics were dreadful because they had no leadership. So what do? They start attracting people from politics and largely from the economic freedom fighters. They've even recently put out a constitution, right? In a homage to that wonderful leader who did so well for his country, Mao Zedong. They don't have the red book, they've got the green book. And basically it's communism 3.0. Now one has to ask the question, ANC's communist or the South African Communist Party's communism not good enough? The EFF's communism's not good enough. Now we're going to try another version of communism, where it all looks the same, it all has the same roots, all has the same message, it's all got the same sort of plan. Well, if you've left one party for another and now for another, maybe it's no longer ideological. Maybe you just need a job. And you're seeing a party declining, and you're leaving to go and join the other place, because now at least, you know, it's the old story. You're in middle management here. If I go to that company, I can be in senior management. So now what's busy happening is that Umkhonto weSizwe is being staffed by a whole lot of celebrities. Firstly, we had all the celebrity rogues, Brian Molefe, Lucky Montana, Siyabonga Gama, all these people that were fingered in state capture, they now in Parliament, led by John Slope, the first judge to be impeached. And on top of that, you're going to have all of the EFF celebrity politicians that weren't really politicians. Busisiwe Mkhwebane wasn't a politician. She was a lawyer that became the public protector. Fana Mokoena wasn't a politician. He was an actor who sort of had a bit of a profile. He's sitting in, now he's going to be, one would imagine, sitting in those Umkhonto we Sizwe benches. Even Mzwanele Manye. He was a so-called businessman, spokesperson for Tiger Brands, if I'm not mistaken, many years, when he was still called Jimmy Manye. Parachuted into the ANC, parachuted into the EFF, and now parachuted into MK. The problem with this tactic is that these are not people that the followers necessarily attracted the followers. Followers join parties because they like people who are on the ground doing the hard work. Well, what we've seen in both the EFF and now the MK is that those people who are on the ground doing the work are not being rewarded with the plum positions. These are going for people outside. These are going to the celebrities that need the 2 million rand a year salary that comes with Parliament. And it just creates discord down below. And that's fine. It will all play out in the next election. As we know, the EFF ahead of the 2024 election went on this whole campaign of employing celebrities. That backfired in the 2024 election spectacularly, where they had got rid of the people that had really done hard work on the ground. But, you know, the people that matter, i.e. the voters, didn't really see those people as being EFF leaders. And I dare say a similar thing is going to happen when MK go to the polls the next time. Because let's face it, you know, what have those state capture rogues ever done for the voters? What have actors or Busisiwe Mkhwebane, by losing court cases, ever done for the electorate? I don't see this as being a winning formula. I don't see, you know, what do they call it, old wine in new bottles being a great selling point, i.e. we're real communists. Those guys aren't really communists. We're the communists. Well, it all gets a little bit tiresome. So I don't know if this is a great political strategy, but my Lord, it's going to happen, and all that's going to happen is the same bulge of people that used to be in the ANC on the more radical side, the RET faction as they were called, that left to go and join Julius Malema on the EFF, are now leaving the EFF to go and join the new shiny thing, which is Umkhonto we Sizwe party. And I got a feeling they're going to have the same predictable outcome. But it does also raise another issue in my mind, and that is about politicians leaving parties. Now, we've been subjected to the outrage, especially in the media, for years, about black leaders that leave the DA, saying that the DA's got a race problem. Well, here we stand ahead of the weekend, and I'm desperate to see what our newspaper opinion writers are going to write about people leaving EFF. Do they have a communism problem? Are they not communist enough? You know, so what I'm saying is that sometimes people leave for their own vested interests. Often what happens with politicians, let's face it, it's a very simple thing. Everybody joins politics, or certainly a significant number of people get into politics because they fancy that one day they'll be the president of the country. And if they don't see that happening to them, if they don't see that they're going up the levels fast enough, they leave. They join another party, right? What do? They blame something. In the case of the DA, it was very easy. You say blacks, the place is very inhospitable to blacks, even though people like Saviwe Gerube, Solly Malatsi were staying in the DA. But hey, it's a very easy tag. What is going to be the tag for these people that are leaving the EFF? Because there was no tag given to those people that left the ANC that was just expected. We were very quick to reach for one card, and I'm wondering what the other card is that is going to be played when other politicians leave the other parties and go. What are they going to do? Call them racist? I don't see how they could do that. But it's to my mind, very, very interesting. But the bottom line on all of this, the bottom line is that politicians need jobs. And if you don't see your future in party A, you go to party B, right? And then what do you do when you go to party B or you leave that party? You try and improve your own political stocks by bad-mouthing the party you've just left. And then you hope that there'll be voters that will come along and you can end up with one seat in Parliament and you can sell your seat to the highest bidder. Like we saw with Patricia de Lille, like we've seen with Bantu Holomisa. You go out there, you start your own little show, you get one seat in Parliament, you put it up for sale to the highest bidder, you get a seat, hopefully a cabinet post, you get blue lights following you, and then everybody calls that politics. But I think we've got to be very, very, very careful as to what is the motives of these politicians. Is it because they think they're going to make a difference for South Africans, or are they just trying to take care of their own position? There is another thing that happens, and that is revenge politics. And it's safe to say that what we are seeing right now is two cases of severe revenge politics. Jacob Zuma started MK as a revenge against not finishing his term as president. His revenge is against Cyril Ramaphosa. And we'll see where that takes us. And of course, Action SA started as a revenge party for what Herman Mashaba calls, this betrayal by the DA when he was the mayor, and they ceased to support him when he was the mayor of Johannesburg. And it's going to be interesting because, as we mentioned before, Action SA have now used up all of those votes that they got in 2021, where they said they would fight against the ANC, to support the ANC in kicking out the DA mayor. This was revenge come real. Jacob Zuma is not done with his revenge. His revenge will only be served when not a mayor gets removed from power, but a president gets removed from power. And revenge politics in South Africa are right there and alive and well and kicking. The question to you is, what do voters think of revenge politics? Do we like it? Because in every case, the revenge politics isn't necessarily what's best for the citizens and the people that voted for you. And it's going to be very, very interesting, because I think the miscalculation that the politicians are making is that the voters are tired of games. We don't really want to play games. You can play your game. We want to live our lives. We want to drive on decent roads. We want the lights to be on when it's dark. We want water to run when we turn on the taps. And as we said in the weekly update last week, right? Politicians are thinking about voters last. So just chew on this for the weekend, that a whole lot of people are leaving these parties because they've just see their job ending, their nice paycheck ending, and we'll see exactly where they end up and what they're going to do for the country. So what you've got to do is just keep an eye on those politicians. You've got to support Pace Car Rental. They keep us on air. You've got to subscribe to this channel because we have the best content. And we'll see you next week on the weekly update. Thank you very much for joining me.